Okay, so I'm Mr. Thomasson, and I teach senior English and junior English at Kings Mountain High School in Kings Mountain, North Carolina. And you are?
And I'm Ms. Morris, and I teach English at Redwood High School in Marin, in California.
Okay, so today we're going to talk about research papers generally and finding a topic, thesis statement, question kind of more specifically. So this is the way we start. We always start the research process by either finding a topic that we're interested in or thinking of a question that we're interested in answering. That's how all research starts. So, Ms. Morris, what are you interested in that we could start with for this process?
So I'm interested in social media, things like Twitter or text messaging. I'm interested in kind of teaching and teenagers. Is there any kind of way I could make a topic out of that stuff?
How about this right here? There's a lot of research that I've seen lately about whether text messaging, generally like the language and the abbreviations and all that kind of stuff, are making kids smarter, like more likely to read things, more likely to write their own stuff, or is making them stupider and unable to spell and unable to communicate with each other. How about something like that?
That sounds really interesting. So how do I start my research? What do I do next?
Okay, so lots and lots and lots of teachers say don't use Wikipedia for this, but pretty much all researchers, even like professors that I've had in college, say this is where you start. Now, you probably shouldn't use Wikipedia as a source for like a works cited page at the end of this process, but it's where pretty much everybody starts this process.
Okay.
So I would go to a Wikipedia kind of page and look up, I don't know, text messaging or text messaging literacy or something like that.
No, that's not what I'm looking for.
And well, that happens when we're doing the beginning of research too. I mean, that's one of those things that always happens. You have to go down a couple dead ends before you can find the place where you're looking for.
So maybe media literacy? Is that what I'm...
That'd be a place to start, sure.
Okay.
And maybe we'll find out that we need to expand our topic a little bit. That happens.
Media literacy.
Okay, that seems like a place to start. So you could scan that page, but what I generally suggest to students to do, and I think is a good place to start, scan the page enough to make sure that you are kind of on the right page, on the right track, and then scroll all the way to the bottom of the page, which for some of them is pretty far. And at the bottom of the page, it will often have external links, it'll have citations, it'll have, you see those?
Yep.
And maybe while the Wikipedia entry itself is not the best of sources to cite, these sources here are.
Okay.
They're academic, all of those kind of important things. So check out and see what you have there.
Looks like there's quite a bit that say education. That's probably close to what I'm looking for. Or what's really best for learning. That seems like a good link to click on.
That would be a good place to start, I think.
Okay. Newest research study and their feelings on social media. But I don't really want to know their feelings. I want to know if it affects the way that they read and write.
It's very important to have kind of a good idea of what you're doing. I mean, the kind of question you want to ask. And it seems to me that the question you're interested in is social media, is text messaging, all of those kind of things generally positive influences in teenagers' lives, or generally brain drain kind of things, right? Are they destroying your intellect, or are they helping it out?
Yeah, I think that's what I want to write about.
Okay, so we always start research, as we've seen right here, with a question. Is text messaging, social media, whatever, destroying people's brains, or is it helping them out? Now, you'll hear us in the next few videos really talking a lot about a thesis statement, and all of you are in high school by now, and all of you are probably juniors and seniors in high school, and all of you probably already know what a thesis statement is because you've all had extraordinary teachers in your past. But just to make sure that everybody's on the same page, a thesis statement is a statement that articulates what the rest of your paper is going to be about. It tells you which side of the argument, more or less, that you're going to be falling on. So make sure you understand this, though, because this is something students in my classes in the past have had trouble with, is that a thesis statement is not a question. It's a statement. So you ask a question, is text messaging a positive thing or a negative thing? Your answer to that question would be a thesis statement. Does that make sense?
Yeah. So,
Okay.
so for a thesis statement, I'm going to just go to Google Docs really quick. Is there any kind of right thesis statement or a wrong thesis statement?
There are generally not. I mean, there are better thesis statements and worse thesis statements, and we'll talk in a separate video about how to write it more elegantly or more beautifully or whatever. But to start with, at least to kick off your research process, you need to have a question, you need to answer the question, because you need to be looking for research that either supports text messaging being a negative force or being a positive force. Does that make sense?
So if my question is text messaging a positive force or negative force in teen literacy? Literacy meaning reading and writing. So that's really what I'm looking for the answer to?
That would be where I would start anyway. And you may find there are plenty of sources to answer that question, and you may find that there are not, but that's certainly the place to start anyway.
Okay. Cool. Can I type the whole question into Google?
You could. I mean, I don't give you a whole lots of intellectual feedback or whatever, but I think that it's not going to hurt.
So it looks like there's lots and lots of sources. Are there ones that I should be clicking on first?
I would imagine probably so. To maybe look for things that come from newspaper articles, or you might want to look for things that are coming from sites that say perhaps at the end like .gov or .org, because those are more likely to be not necessarily peer-reviewed, but more likely to be sources that you can trust.
Okay. Can you see, there you can see this?
Well, New York Times, for example, would be a great place to start.
So when I find a source that I think I want to use, what should I do?
I would start personally by maybe copying the URL into a Google Doc or into a Word file or something like that, and starting it's not really a pure annotated bibliography because it's not a pure citation, but I would start by taking the URL and maybe writing a sentence beneath it saying, this source is about blank. It would support the positive, it would be about the negative, it would be about, you see what I'm saying? Mm-hmm. So what you're essentially doing to start with is creating a list of sources that you can draw back from. You're not really getting into the nitty-gritty of the research yet. Okay. You are doing more of a list or a summary of what is out there. So you'll kind of know ultimately whether you have enough to create a 5 or 6 page or 10 page or whatever, however long your paper needs to be.
Okay. So once I have a few sources, what do I do next?
I would start scanning the sources and perhaps seeing maybe what side of the debate they tend to fall on. There are 2 ways to decide how to answer the question. One, for questions like this, you're probably going to find answers that fall on both sides of the spectrum, right? Mm-hmm. So the way you would decide to answer the question is either which side has the most research to prove their point is correct, or which one you most genuinely believe. And lots of times that's the same thing. But because most people make up their minds based on their personal experience, and lots of times people's personal experience is backed up by research. Okay. So that's kind of where I would start. Once you have a short list of 5 or 10 sources, you can probably start deciding what side of the argument you're going to fall on, and then start from that point, you can start focusing your research question a little more specifically,
Okay.
I think.
So far we've found a question that I was interested in, and once we found a question, I went to Wikipedia and tried to get a little bit of background on it, and to see if it was an answerable question. And then we did a little bit of Googling for the topic to see, are there sources out there that will work? And then I started
Right.
making a list with just a quick annotation of, so here's the link and here's what it's about. So at that point, now I can start deciding what side I want to be on.
That's more or less where you go, and that's not the whole opening research cycle, but that's how all research starts. Just doing pretty much exactly what you just described and what we just went through. And if you find, and there are a couple results here, you can find that you don't really want to do this topic and you pick something else. You can decide that this is really awesome, you want to continue with this, and you go back through the same cycle a couple other times after you've refined your search a little bit. So the point is that research is always a circle, right? You ask a question, you find out some information about that, you get an answer to your question, you ask another one, you go around in that circle over and over again. Mm-hmm. And that's how you end up with, 8 pages of paper instead of 1.5.
Okay. All right. Well, thank you for your help. Now, if you'll excuse me, I have some very important research to do.